Hello everyone, and welcome back to Queen Elizabeth, A Day in Her Life. In our last episode, the Queen was traveling, representing her country, and enjoying herself. Then she had to have an appendix operation, and she got back to her healthy self again. So let's see what's going on today. January 24th, 1965, Sandringham got the news that Winston Churchill died. It was a sad moment for Britain. Churchill lay in state in Westminster Hall. 300,000 people filed past his coffin. At St. Paul's Cathedral on January 29th, he was given the first state funeral for a person not of royal rank since the Duke of Wellington in 1852. The ceremony was attended by 6,000 people and all senior members of the royal family, including the Queen and the Queen Mother. 15 heads of state were there, and 112 countries were represented. The ceremony was solemn but stirring, and Churchill had promised that there would be lively hymns. The era of British imperialism into which both Churchill and Queen Elizabeth had been born was gone. But over the years to come, Queen Elizabeth remained true to the concept of British greatness, which Churchill had defended, preserved, and personified. She did everything she could to sustain the Commonwealth, Britain's inspired attempt to come to terms with the end of and the legacy of empire. Her daughter, the Queen, was, if anything, even more passionately committed to the ideals of the Commonwealth. 3 weeks after Churchill died, Queen Elizabeth went on a visit to Jamaica. She had been invited to receive the first honorary degree awarded by the University of the West Indies, of which Princess Alice, Countess of Athlone, was Chancellor. The journey out on February 18th involved an exhausting wait and a superheated VIP lounge at Kennedy Airport, and 2 more flights before Queen Elizabeth and her party arrived at King's House, Jamaica at 5 a.m. London time. The evening of February 20th, her degree of Doctor of Letters was conferred upon her by Princess Alice. She made a short speech of thanks, but Adlai Stevenson gave an unexpectedly long speech. He was a distinguished American statesman, and it was 10:30 p.m. before the reception for her could be held. By now she was tired, of course, but then a steel band played, and she asked to be shown the local ska dance. The next morning, Holy Communion at St. Andrew's Parish Church took some time, and over 800 people had come to share the sacrament with her. Then she had a spectacular twisting drive up the hills above Kensington to lunch at the military camp of Newcastle. The Queen Mother was enjoying her trip, she wrote to Princess Margaret, but I always have very bad luck with the drinks. Perhaps because I'm considered a frail invalid. I am always given delicious fruit drinks with so little alcohol that one feels quite sick. Then I ask timidly if I might have just a very little gin in it, and then too much is put in, and I have to ask for a little more ice to stop my throat from being burnt. And so it goes. This is usually at government houses, I may say. She wouldn't have that problem when she went to lunch with Noel Coward at his home, Firefly Hill. It was a small party, and lunch was a delicious curry cooked in a coconut shell. She enjoyed Coward's wit, and she invited him to stay at Sandringham for the King's Lynn Festival that July to hear the Russian cellist Mstislav Rostropovich. On the afternoon of February 26th, after a drive through cheering crowds, Queen Elizabeth flew home via New York. On the last leg of the journey overnight to London, her party let themselves go. Dinner on board the airplane was very gay and lasted so long that no one had more than an hour's sleep. The British High Commissioner in Jamaica reported to the Commonwealth Secretary that Queen Elizabeth impressed everyone with her charm and zestful interest, and that the visit will have served to strengthen the attachment to the throne of an already loyalist country. In June 1965, Queen Elizabeth returned to Canada, this time in honor of the Toronto Scottish, and it was their 50th anniversary that was being celebrated. By now, however, the Canadian government's expansive attitude toward royal visits, the more the merrier, had given way to an understandable reluctance to foot the bill for the visits which were for the benefit of local organizations. This led to a testy correspondence between Canadian officials and Martin Gilead. The Toronto Scottish, together with the Ontario Jockey Club, which had invited her to attend the running of the Queen's Plate, agreed to pay the cost of the trip. But Queen Elizabeth was worried about her regiment taking on such expense and asked Gilead to approach the British government to pay for her flights to and from Canada. This was agreed, but the Canadian government, which had not been consulted, was affronted. A compromise was reached, and the regiment paid for her journey out on a commercial flight, and the Canadian government provided a Royal Canadian Air Force Yukon to fly her home. She flew to Toronto on the afternoon of June 23rd and stayed with her party at Winfields, the home of Mr. and Mrs. E.P. Taylor, who shared her enthusiasm for racehorses. The next day, after several engagements in the city, she was taken to see Taylor's stud farm and some 55 thoroughbred yearlings. Over the next 3 days, Queen Elizabeth presented colors to the regiments at a ceremony attended by some 22,000 people, and went to a service for laying up the old colors at the Knox Presbyterian Church. Among engagements, she lunched with Vincent Massey at Batterwood and watched the Queen's Plate Stakes at the Woodbine racetrack. When she left, they drove 10 miles to the airport in an open car along a road lined by thousands of cheering people, and she arrived back in London on June 28th. 2 weeks later, she flew to Germany to visit British regiments and units in the British Army of the Rhine, accompanied by Princess Marina, Duchess of Kent. Then Queen Elizabeth went to Minden to visit the 1st Battalion, the Black Watch. She took the salute and inspected a guard of honor, but the Highland gathering which had been planned was washed out by a thunderstorm. The last day was devoted to other regiments, the 9th and the 12th Royal Lancers at Osnabruck, where she was watched a mounted parade and attended a regimental fete before flying back to London. In March 1966, she set off for a postponed tour of Australia and New Zealand, flying with Qantas via Ontario, Vancouver, and Fiji. In Adelaide, the official and formal engagements included many drives through crowded streets, a civic welcome at the town hall, a reception for the media, luncheons, and a tour of floral and handicraft exhibits put on by 600 members of the Country Women's Association. There were floral creations in Victoria Parks. The best thing was a carpet of flowers made in an Aboriginal design. On this tour, as on other trips, Queen Elizabeth was irritated only if there was too much formality or protocol. She was also looking for ways to make officials relax, and if engagements were going well, she stayed on. It pleased the person she was talking to, but it upset the schedule. She enjoyed the slip-ups. Across the country in Perth, she had another 5 busy days. This included a visit to an aquatic carnival at the Beatty Park Aquatic Center, which was packed with 5,000 children for her visit. As she arrived, the announcer on the public address system declared the Queen Mother is now in the pool. This raised laughter and cheering, which continued unceasingly till she left, an hour and a half later. On returning to Government House, she found the drive lined with members of the Boys and Girls Brigades and got out of the car to walk down the ranks and talk to as many of the young people as possible. From Perth, she went to Fremantle, where, among other engagements, she gave a speech to a room full of teenagers. Frances Campbell Preston recorded that she rather dreaded this occasion, but that it went off very well in the event. It was then that she went to Canberra, where she was overjoyed to see Prince Charles. He had been released from Gordonstone to be an exchange student for 2 terms at Timbertop, the rural outpost of Geelong Grammar School in Victoria. Princess Margaret wrote to her mother to say that she was so happy that she and Prince Charles were together, for I have never known a grandson more devoted than Charles is to you. She said that she and her sister, the Queen, had had glowing accounts of their mother's usual smash hit success. Her Majesty in powder blue stepped from the plane radiant. The most enjoyable part of the trip for Queen Elizabeth and Prince Charles was a visit to the Snowy Mountains hydroelectric project in New South Wales. Between visits to the dams, they stayed in the delightful Queen Elizabeth Cottage at Island Bend, where the Prince and other members of the party fished. Prince Charles and his grandmother spent so much time joking together that they reduced the whole party to giggles. The Australian tour ended on April 7th after a return visit to Canberra and a dinner party attended by the Prime Minister and Mrs. Harold Holt. Holt later disappeared off a beach in Victoria, and his body was never found. Prince Charles returned happily for his last few weeks at Timbertop, and the Queen Mother and party flew to Fiji, where Britannia was waiting to take her on the next part of her tour. Getting on the yacht was like arriving home, the Queen felt. On Easter Saturday, the ship docked in Suva for the formal welcome from a Fijian chief, and the short visit had rainfall, but Queen Elizabeth held a reception and a dinner aboard the yacht before sailing for New Zealand. She landed at the Bluff on April 16th in pouring rain, and was greeted by the Governor-General, Sir Bernard Ferguson, and his wife Laura, and the Prime Minister and his wife. Her punishing schedule over the coming weeks was made possible by Britannia. It was a grate for transportation and a refuge, and it was a place to escape after long days of exposure to the crowds and the elements. When there were evenings in the yacht with no engagements, Queen Elizabeth encouraged everyone to let their hair down. Laura Ferguson heard that after-dinner games were expected, but it turned out to be both silly and easy, and she had enormous fun playing them. In town after town across New Zealand, the Queen Mother was greeted by huge crowds of all ages, cheering her along streets from one civic reception to another. On April 25th, she was in Wellington, and she marked Anzac Day at the National Memorial in Wellington. She always found such moments of remembrance for the war dead intensely moving. The engagements continued. May 1st, after Sunday service in St. John's Anglican Church, she flew to Auckland, where, despite torrential rain, the crowds packing the streets and the wharf by Britannia were so dense it took an hour for her car to reach the yacht. Next day, there was a civic reception and a performance by children dancing and doing gymnastics in Eden Park. On one quiet day off, there was enough sunshine to go fishing on Lake Wanaka. Queen Elizabeth wasn't too happy about having to pose in waiter's tweed jacket, a green felt hat, and pearls, casting an unfamiliar rod for a group of photographers. The deal was that the photographers would take her picture and then they would leave her alone, and they kept their word. Near the end of her trip, she made a quiet private visit to a stud and attended a reception at Government House. On her last day, she opened a new science building at the University of Auckland and received an honorary degree. She went to the races at Ellerslie and gave a dinner in Britannia, followed by a reception on board for 300 people, as rain leaked through the awning. The next morning there was a long farewelling, a term they discovered in Australia, to the officers and crew of the yacht, before the Queen Elizabeth left her airport. Admiral Morgan had organized the Royal Marine Band to play Will Ye Now Come Back Again, while the entire ship's company stood and saluted on the top deck. There was hardly a dry eye, wrote Francis Campbell Preston. And once again the roads to the airport were lined with thousands of people. In a letter, the Queen Mother wrote that the love and loyalty of the New Zealand people is something I shall always treasure. Long may it be part of their philosophy of life. The flight home was long, and the aircraft landed to refuel in both Honolulu, where she was joined in a dance by hula girls in her honor, and Vancouver, where during her one-day stopover, she visited City Hall and attended a formal lunch. She arrived back in England to find to her joy that spring was there. The cherries are bowed down with blossom, and the birches and chestnuts a most tender green. Towards the end of her trip, she had written to her son-in-law, Lord Snowdon, saying that she loved New Zealand's great mountains and lakes and rivers, but was rather longing to get home and hear those yelling dogs and play with the grandchildren and burn with rage at politics. She disliked the Labour government's mishandling of taxation. Harold Wilson's administration was into its second year of the reforms and was now planning a selective employment tax, which she feared would hit many excellent institutions very hard. And she hated what she saw as the government's mismanagement of the Rhodesia question. In November 1965, the white Rhodesian government made its unilateral declaration of independence rather than move swiftly towards black majority rule as demanded by the British government. The Queen celebrated her 66th birthday in London and went with her daughters to the theater to see the prime of Miss Jean Brodie. Next day, she flew up to Wick for her summer visit to the Castle of May and Burke Hall. In September 1966, she launched the HMS Resolution, the first of Britain's Polaris-class nuclear submarines, now to be the front line of the country's independent nuclear deterrent, and a few days later flew by helicopter to land on the deck of one of her favorite ships, HMS Ark Royal, which he had launched in 1950. She enjoyed watching various types of aircraft landing and being catapulted off the deck, the firing of live ordnance, air-sea rescue, and mid-air fueling. On her departure, her helicopter circled the carrier, and the lady-in-waiting recorded, "Queen Elizabeth waved her scarf through the open door." A Russian trawler snooped about all day and had to be warned off because of the firing. It was a very special day. After a busy autumn filled with engagements, on December 6th, she gave a lunch party at Clarence House and attended a reception given by the Women's Royal Voluntary Service at St. James Palace. After dinner that evening, she checked quietly into King Edward VII's hospital. The Queen Mother had been diagnosed with cancer of the colon. The tumor was removed in an operation on December 10th. Members of her family visited her, and from Gordonstone, Prince Charles wrote, "I hope they're looking after you well. Mummy said that you had difficulty getting around 2 ginormous policemen wedged in the corridor outside your room." She was still in the hospital over Christmas, and so on Christmas Day, the Queen, with Princess Margaret, Prince Charles, and Princess Anne, drove down from Sandringham to see her. The Queen Mother left the hospital December the 28th and stayed at Clarence House to recover until she felt well enough to travel to Sandringham in the middle of January. She had no reoccurrence of the disease. Rumors spread that she had had a colonostomy. This wasn't true. Her office was very careful to say very little on the subject, and some years later Sir Richard Bayliss, physician to the Queen, wrote to her lady-in-waiting, Olivia Mulholland, "I understand that there have been a number of letters about the colonostomy operation which Queen Elizabeth is alleged to have had. We of course know that this is incorrect, and I think it's time that as unobtrusively as possible that this lie is countered. But the rumors still continue. Even though her operation did not include a colonostomy, the cancer from which she suffered was serious. This made her family and household concerned that she was still performing her duties as she was approaching her 70th birthday. But in most respects, her health remained remarkably good. She no longer suffered from the frequent bouts of tonsillitis that she'd gone through as a young woman, and she still believed in the power of homeopathy. The Queen Mother was also treated for ulcers, and she used homeopathy for that, and she was prescribed hawthorn for blood pressure and belladonna for sore throats. Queen Elizabeth also continued to swear by the healing power of arnica for both tablet and ointment form, and she handed it to any of her guests who bruised themselves. Following her operation, she canceled 9 engagements during the first 3 months of 1967. That year, her public engagements were down to 52. 8 went to the University of London, and she spent January at Sandringham, where she said the Norfolk air made her feel so much better. February and March, she was at Clarence House and Royal Lodge, with frequent expeditions to race meetings. Her first public engagement was an annual meeting of Queen Mary's London Needlework Guild at St. James's Place on the 21st of March. And April 27th, she dined with the London Scottish Regiment. Well, I'm going to end the video here. In this episode, the Queen Mother showed her boundless energy once more, and she did a lot of traveling, going to Jamaica, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. She enjoyed the crowds, but also enjoyed the quiet times when she got everyone on the yacht to play games after dinner. It made everybody feel relaxed, and they all had a good time. Then we found out the Queen had to have a serious operation that people thought was a colonostomy. And even though it wasn't, it was still a serious operation. And also we found out that the Queen was a believer in homeopathic treatment. It must have been helpful because she lived a long time, and that was a good thing. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you haven't subscribed, if you could do so, it would help the channel to grow, as well as giving it a thumbs up. It's all a great help. And if you haven't clicked on the notification bell, if you could do that, it lets you know when a video is posted. Well, I wish everybody a good day, and tune in again soon for another episode of Queen Elizabeth, A Day in Her Life. Thank you. Bye.